I paid for her dream wedding, but she stole $15,000 from me. I confronted her, and my husband handed me divorce papers. She's carrying the child you couldn't give me, he smirked. Mom laughed at my tears. They thought I was helpless, until I revealed the prenup they forgot. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. Yesterday was supposed to be a triumph. It was the day my younger sister, Rachel, finally walked down the aisle in a ceremony that cost more than my first 3 cars combined. And who paid for it? I did. Of course I did. I'm Sarah. I'm the reliable one. I'm the one with the successful interior design firm and the heavy checkbook. I stood there in the church, watching Rachel sparkle in a Vera Wang gown that I had swiped my card for, and I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. Relief that maybe, just maybe, she was finally settled. Relief that the endless demands for florists, caterers, and string quartets were over. I woke up this morning feeling like I had been run over by a truck. The emotional hangover of a family wedding is real, especially when you are the one signing the checks. My husband, Mark, was already up. I could hear the shower running in the master bathroom. I rolled over, reaching for my phone on the nightstand to check my emails. It is a habit I can't break. Running a business means you never really clock off. But before I could even open my work email, a notification from my bank popped up on the screen. It was a fraud alert. My heart did that awful little flip in my chest. I sat up, blinking the sleep away, and tapped on the app. I expected to see a double charge from the reception venue or maybe a hold from the hotel where we had put up the out-of-town guests. Instead, I froze. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense. $15,000. Gone. Transferred out of our joint savings account at 2 a.m. last night. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to change, waiting for it to be a glitch. But the transaction was there, clear as day. It wasn't a hack from some anonymous server in a foreign country. It was a wire transfer. And the recipient wasn't a scammer. The recipient was New Life Fertility and Obstetrics VIP services. My stomach dropped. New Life? That was the most exclusive, expensive clinic in the city. Why on earth would $15,000 be going there from my account in the middle of the night? I threw the covers off. Panic started to rise in my throat, tasting like bile. I needed to ask Mark. Maybe he knew something. Maybe it was a mistake. But deep down, a cold, snake-like dread was already curling around my spine. I walked to the bathroom door. The water stopped running. Mark? I called out, my voice sounding shrill in the quiet bedroom. Mark, you need to come out here. Something is wrong with the bank account. The door opened. Mark stepped out, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. Steam billowed out behind him, smelling of his expensive sandalwood soap. He didn't look worried. He didn't look confused. He looked ready. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen in our 20 years of marriage. It wasn't love. It wasn't even annoyance. It was a blank, icy indifference. I held up the phone, my hand shaking. Mark, $15,000 was wired to a fertility clinic last night. Did you authorize this? Were we hacked? He didn't even look at the phone. He walked past me, towards the walk-in closet, and started pulling on his clothes. It wasn't a hack, Sarah, he said calmly. His voice was steady. Too steady. What do you mean? I followed him. Why would you send money to a fertility clinic? We aren't doing that anymore. You know we can't. He pulled a crisp white dress shirt off the hanger. He buttoned it slowly, methodically, starting from the bottom. "I know you can't, Sarah," he said, finally meeting my eyes. The air left the room. "What?" Mark turned to face me fully. He looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, an employee he was about to fire. "I sent the money," he said. "And I'm glad you saw it. It saves me the trouble of bringing it up over coffee." "Bringing what up?" I whispered. I felt dizzy. My knees felt weak, and I had to grab the edge of the dresser to steady myself. He reached into his briefcase, which was sitting packed by the door. I hadn't noticed it before. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and tossed it onto the bed between us. It landed with a heavy slap. "I want a divorce, Sarah," he said. The world stopped. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at the envelope, then at him. "Divorce?" I stammered. "But we were just dancing at the wedding last night. We were happy." "Mark, what is happening? Is this about the money? If you needed money for something, you could have just asked. You didn't have to steal it." He laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Steal? It's a joint account, Sarah. It's my money too. And frankly, I've earned it. Putting up with you for 2 decades? That's hard labor." He checked his watch. A Rolex I had bought him for his promotion last year. "My lawyer has already filed the paperwork. I suggest you get one too. Although, considering how emotional you get, maybe you should just sign what I give you and save us both the drama." I stood there, trembling in my pajamas, while the man I had shared my life with for 20 years stood fully dressed, looking at me with pure contempt. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why now? Why today?" Mark smiled, and it sent a chill down my spine. "Because the timing is perfect," he said. "Rachel's wedding is over. The family is all in town. And I'm finally done waiting for you to be something you can never be." He picked up his bag. "Come downstairs when you're dressed, Sarah. We have a family meeting." "Family meeting?" I repeated, confused. "Everyone is waiting," he said over his shoulder as he walked out the door. "Your parents. Rachel. Me. We all need to talk to you." He left me standing there, the bank notification still glowing on my phone screen. $15,000. A fertility clinic. A divorce. And a family meeting. I didn't know it then, but my life as I knew it had ended the moment I woke up. I was walking into an execution, and the people holding the axe were the ones I loved the most. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, paralyzed. The shock was a physical weight, pinning me to the floor. My mind couldn't process the cruelty I had just witnessed. Mark's face, so cold, so detached, kept flashing before my eyes. But as the initial numbness began to fade, a familiar feeling washed over me. It was a dull, aching sense of responsibility. Even in the midst of my own crisis, my brain automatically switched to fix-it mode. That was my role. That had always been my role. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me, trying to find the root of this nightmare. I have always been the invisible child. The useful one. The fixer. I'm 48 years old now, but I can still feel the sting of being 10 years old, standing in the living room with a report card full of straight A's, waiting for my parents to look up from the TV. They never did. Not really. Then Rachel came along. Rachel, my baby sister. She is 14 years younger than me. When she was born, it was like the sun suddenly decided to shine only on her. She was the miracle baby. The golden child. She was cute, bubbly, and demanding. And I became the third parent. While Rachel was taking ballet lessons and going to summer camps, I was working part-time jobs after school to save for my own college fund. My parents, Brenda and Robert, made it clear early on that their resources were limited, and those resources were earmarked for Rachel. Sarah is strong, my mother would say, patting my hand dismissively. Sarah can take care of herself. But Rachel needs us. And I believed them. I wore my independence like a badge of honor. I built my interior design company from the ground up. I worked 18-hour days. I skipped vacations. I ate ramen noodles in a studio apartment so I could reinvest every penny into my business. And when the money finally started coming in, who was the first in line with their hand out? My family. I remember 10 years ago, when Rachel was 24. She had gotten herself into massive credit card debt, gambling online and buying designer purses she couldn't afford. Collectors were calling the house. My parents were frantic. They called me in the middle of a client meeting, crying. "They're going to ruin her credit, Sarah," my dad had shouted. "She's just a baby. She didn't know any better. You have to help her." I had just bought my first luxury car, a symbol that I had finally made it. I loved that car. But I looked at my parents' terrified faces, and I caved. I sold the car the next week. I took the check, drove to the bank, and paid off Rachel's debt in full. $25,000. I remember handing the receipt to Rachel. I expected a hug. A thank you. Maybe even a tear. Instead, she snatched the paper from my hand, checked the balance, and sighed. "Took you long enough," she mumbled. I was so stressed out I broke out in hives. My parents hugged her. They cooed over her, telling her it was all over, that she was safe now. Nobody hugged me. Nobody asked me how I felt about walking back to the bus stop. That was the pattern. I gave, they took. I solved problems, they created them. And Mark knew all of this. When we met, he seemed to be the only one who saw me. He saw the tired woman behind the successful CEO. He told me I didn't have to be strong all the time. He told me he wanted to take care of me. But looking back now, through the lens of this morning's betrayal, I wonder if he ever really saw me. Or did he just see what my family saw? A safety net. A golden goose. He had watched me pay for Rachel's college tuition when she decided she wanted to study fashion merchandising and then dropped out a semester later. He watched me pay off my parents' mortgage so they could retire early. He watched me pay $50,000 for Rachel's wedding yesterday, the flowers, the dress, the open bar where she got drunk and made a toast to finding a rich husband. Mark never stopped me. In fact, he encouraged it. "It's family, Sarah," he would say. "You can afford it. Don't be stingy." Stingy. That word cut me every time. Now, standing in the silence of the room, realizing he had just walked out on me, I felt a wave of nausea. I wasn't just a wife to him. I was a resource. And resources get used up. I looked at the mirror. I saw a woman who looked tired. There were fine lines around my eyes that no amount of expensive cream could hide. I saw a woman who had spent her entire life buying love that was never actually for sale. "Family meeting," he had said. I wiped a tear from my cheek. I wouldn't let them see me cry. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I went to the closet and bypassed the sweatpants I wanted to crawl into. Instead, I pulled out a structured blazer and tailored trousers. My armor. If they wanted a meeting, I would give them a meeting. But I wasn't going down there as the victim. I was going down there as the CEO. Or so I thought. I had no idea that the knife they were about to twist in my back was far sharper than just money. Before I left the sanctuary of my bedroom, I had to take a moment to breathe. The mention of the fertility clinic on that bank transaction was throbbing in my mind like an infected wound. It hurt more than the missing money. It hurt more than the word divorce. It poked at the deepest, darkest scar on my soul. I walked over to the nightstand and opened the drawer. Underneath a stack of books, there was a small, velvet box. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a hospital bracelet. My hospital bracelet from 8 years ago. Mark and I had tried. God, we had tried so hard. For the first 10 years of our marriage, we were focused on building our lives. I was building the company, Mark was dabbling in various ventures that never really took off, living mostly off my salary. We were happy, or so I thought. But when I turned 40, the clock didn't just tick, it sounded like a bomb counting down. We started trying. Month after month of negative tests. The hope that would bloom in my chest every time my period was late, only to be crushed into dust days later. Then came the diagnosis. Endometriosis. Stage 4. My uterus was a battlefield of scar tissue and inflammation. The doctor was kind but blunt. Natural conception is impossible, Sarah. We moved to IVF. Do you know what IVF is like? It is brutal. It is invasive. It strips you of your dignity. I injected hormones into my stomach until my skin was black and blue. I underwent retrieval surgeries that left me cramped and bleeding. I spent thousands of dollars, my dollars, chasing a ghost. 5 rounds. 5 failures. The last miscarriage nearly killed me. I was 42. I hemorrhaged in the middle of the night. I remember the rush to the emergency room, the blinding lights, the metallic smell of blood. When I woke up, the doctor told me they had to perform an emergency hysterectomy to save my life. My womb was gone. The dream was dead. I remember lying in that hospital bed, feeling hollowed out. I felt less than a woman. I felt broken. I looked for Mark. I needed him to hold my hand. I needed him to tell me that I was enough, that we were enough. But he wasn't holding my hand. He was standing by the window, looking out at the parking lot. He smelled of cigarette smoke, even though he had quit years ago. "I'm sorry," I had whispered, my voice raspy from the anesthesia. He didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his eyes were dry. "It's okay," he said. But the tone wasn't comforting. It was resigned. It was the tone of a man who had made a bad investment and was cutting his losses. "At least we save on the college fund," he had muttered under his breath a few weeks later. He claimed it was a joke. A dark joke to cope with the pain. But after that, a wall went up between us. He stopped touching me. He stopped looking at me with desire. He started sleeping with his back to me. Whenever the topic of children came up at dinner parties, Mark would sigh loudly and say, "Well, Sarah is a career woman. The business is her baby." He made it sound like a choice. Like I had chosen money over motherhood. He let people believe I was selfish, rather than broken. And I let him. Because I felt guilty. I felt like I had failed him. He wanted a legacy. He wanted a son. He was a man with a traditional ego but without the success to back it up, so he needed a biological copy of himself to validate his existence. And I couldn't give him that. So when I saw that transfer to New Life Fertility, my first irrational thought was that maybe he was trying to find a surrogate for us. Maybe he wanted to surprise me. But that thought died the moment he asked for a divorce. Mark wasn't trying to fix us. I stared at the hospital bracelet in the velvet box one last time. I snapped the lid shut. The pain of infertility is a quiet, lonely thing. It eats you from the inside out. But today, that pain was transforming into something else. Rage. Why was he sending money to a fertility clinic now? Who was it for? A sickening suspicion began to form in my gut. A puzzle piece I didn't want to fit. Rachel. Rachel, who had been glowing at her wedding. Rachel, who had refused the champagne toast I paid for. Rachel, who had gained a little weight recently that my mother attributed to happy stress. No. It couldn't be. That was too twisted. That was a soap opera plot, not my life. But as I walked down the stairs, hearing the low murmur of voices in the living room, the cold dread returned. I wasn't just walking into a divorce meeting. I was walking into a revelation that would shatter whatever remained of my heart. I walked into the living room. The atmosphere was thick, like the air before a thunderstorm. My parents were sitting on the love seat. My mother, Brenda, was drinking tea from my fine china, the set I told everyone not to use because it was fragile. My father, Robert, was flipping through a magazine, looking bored. Mark was standing by the fireplace, leaning his arm against the mantelpiece as if he owned the place. In his mind, I suppose he did. And Rachel. Rachel wasn't there yet. Finally, Mark said, checking his watch again. We don't have all day, Sarah. I walked to the center of the room, keeping my back straight. I didn't sit down. I didn't want to be lower than them. Where is my money? I asked, my voice cutting through the room. And why are we talking about divorce in front of my parents? Mark chuckled. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of papers. Always about the money with you, isn't it? He sneered. You're so transactional. That's why this marriage is dead. You're cold, Sarah. You're like a dried-up branch. The insult landed exactly where he intended. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, to the empty space where my womb used to be. I have supported you for 20 years, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I built this life. I built this house. And that, Mark interrupted, waving the papers, is exactly the point. We live in a community property state, Sarah. Or have you been too busy picking out throw pillows to read the law? He took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. Everything you built during our marriage is ours. Half of the accounts. Half of the house. And... He paused for dramatic effect, a cruel smile playing on his lips, half of your company. My blood ran cold. The design firm was my life's work. It was the only thing I had left. You wouldn't, I whispered. You don't know the first thing about design. You'd ruin it. I don't want to run it, Mark laughed. I just want to cash out. I want my share. My compensation for the wasted years. My mother chimed in then, setting her teacup down with a clink. Sarah, honey, don't make this difficult, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Mark has been very patient with you. A man has needs. A man needs a legacy. You couldn't give him that. It's only fair you give him financial security. I whipped my head around to look at her. Fair? Mom, he's stealing from me. He's trying to destroy my business. He's your husband, my father grunted, not looking up from his magazine. Or he was. You should have tried harder to keep him happy. Maybe if you spent less time at the office and more time at home, we wouldn't be here. I felt like I was in the twilight zone. They were blaming me. My own parents were sitting in my living room, blaming me for my husband's greed. I want him out, I said, pointing at the door. Mark, get out of my house. Now. Mark didn't move. He just smiled, crossing his arms. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. This is my marital home. I have every right to be here. And besides... He looked towards the hallway leading to the guest suite. We have a guest who needs to be comfortable. Rachel? I asked. Is she still here? Why is she involved in this? Mark's expression shifted. The cruelty remained, but mixed with a sickening kind of pride. Because, he said softly, she has something you don't. She has a future. I looked at my parents. They wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother was studying her fingernails. My father was suddenly very interested in the fireplace. What is going on? I demanded. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Where is my sister? I'm right here, Sarah. The voice came from the hallway. I turned around. And then, everything stopped. The anger, the fear, the confusion, it all coalesced into a single, blinding moment of horror. Rachel stood there. She wasn't wearing her clothes. She was wearing my silk robe, the expensive, hand-painted one I had bought in Italy. But it wasn't the robe that made me gasp. It was the way she was standing. Her hand was resting protectively on her stomach. A stomach that was protruding just enough to be noticeable under the silk. She was pregnant. And looking at Mark's face, that look of pride, of ownership, I didn't need a DNA test. I didn't need a confession. The $15,000 to the fertility clinic. The secret whispers. The divorce. The puzzle pieces slammed together, forming a picture so grotesque I wanted to vomit. Rachel walked into the room, her movements slow and exaggerated, like she was carrying a crown jewel instead of a betrayal. She smirked at me, her fingers tracing circles over the small bump beneath the silk. Surprised? She asked, her voice light and airy. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My brain was short-circuiting. My sister. My husband. How? I finally choked out. You just got married yesterday. To Kevin. Rachel laughed, throwing her head back. Oh, Sarah. Kevin? Kevin is a prop. He's sweet, but he's broke. And frankly, he's boring. We needed the wedding for appearances. Plus, you were paying for it, so why not have a big party? She walked over to Mark. He reached out and wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. He rested his hand on her stomach, right over hers. The intimacy of the gesture was like a physical blow. Kevin doesn't know about the baby? I asked, feeling faint. Kevin thinks it's his, Mark answered for her. For now. We'll handle him later. This isn't about Kevin. This is about us. Us? I whispered. We've been together for 2 years, Sarah, Rachel said, looking at me with pity. Since that Christmas party you were too busy to host properly. Mark was lonely. I was available. 2 years. For 2 years, they had been lying to my face. Eating at my table. Taking my money. Rachel had planned her entire wedding on my dime while sleeping with my husband. And the baby? I pointed a trembling finger at her stomach. IVF, Mark said proudly. We wanted to be sure. We wanted a boy. And we got one. The clinic confirmed it last week. That's my money, I screamed. The rage finally broke through the shock. You used my money to impregnate my sister. I used our money to secure my legacy, Mark corrected, his voice hard. Something you failed to do. I had cancer. I screamed, even though it wasn't cancer, it felt like it. I had a hysterectomy. I almost died. And that's sad, Rachel said, picking at a loose thread on my robe. But Mark deserves to be a father. You can't be selfish, Sarah. You have the career. You have the money. Let me have this. Let Mark have this. You are disgusting, I spat. I took a step toward Rachel. I don't know what I was going to do. Maybe slap her. Maybe rip my robe off her body. But before I could get close, Mark shoved me. It wasn't a playful push. It was a hard, violent shove to my chest. I stumbled back, my heels catching on the rug. I fell hard onto the floor, the impact jarring my spine. "Don't you dare touch her," Mark snarled, standing over me. His face was twisted with aggression. "She is carrying my son. She is worth 10 of you." I looked up at him from the floor. This man who had sworn to protect me. "You hit me," I whispered. "I'm protecting my family," he said. "My real family." I looked over at my parents. Surely, this was the line. Surely, seeing their son-in-law shove their eldest daughter to the ground would snap them out of it. "Mom? Dad?" I pleaded. "Did you see that?" My father cleared his throat. "You are coming at her, Sarah. Mark was just defending her." "Defending her?" I cried, tears streaming down my face now. "She's sleeping with my husband. She's pregnant with his child. That is incest. That is sick." "It's unconventional," my mother said, smoothing her skirt. "But these things happen. And honestly, Sarah, look at the bright side. The baby will be family. It will be your nephew. You can be the aunt. You're good at that. You can buy him things." The room spun. "Buy him things?" I repeated. "That's all I am to you people? A wallet?" "Don't be dramatic," Rachel said, snuggling into Mark's side. "We're giving you a chance to be involved. Mark and I are going to be together. We're going to raise this baby. And since you have this big, empty house with all those unused bedrooms." She looked around the living room, her eyes gleaming with greed. "We think it's best if we raise him here. It's a good environment for a child." I realized then what the endgame was. They didn't just want the money. They wanted my life. They wanted to replace me, completely. Rachel wanted to be the mistress of my house, the wife of my husband, the mother of the child I couldn't have. And they expected me to pay for it. I sat on the floor, the Persian rug scratching my palms. From this low vantage point, they looked like a grotesque tribunal. The adulterous husband, the treacherous sister, and the parents who had sold me out for a grandchild. "You want the house?" I asked quietly, pushing myself up. My hip throbbed where I had landed. "It makes the most sense," my mother said, nodding eagerly. "Rachel needs stability. And you, well, you're always working. You could get a condo in the city. Something smaller. Easier to maintain. Plus," Mark added, "the alimony and child support I'll be asking for will be substantial. If you let us keep the house, I might go easier on the cash demands." "Child support?" I laughed, a hysterical, bubbling sound. "It's not my child." "But I'm your husband," Mark smirked. "And until the divorce is final, my debts are your debts. My expenses are your expenses. And raising an heir is expensive." "You are delusional," I said, dusting off my pants. "I am not giving you my house. I am not giving you a dime. I am going to call my lawyer, and I am going to ruin you." The air in the room shifted. My father stood up. He wasn't a tall man, but he had a way of looking disappointed that made me feel small. "Sarah," he said sternly. "Don't be vindictive. It doesn't suit you." "Vindictive? Dad, they are robbing me. They are family," he shouted, his face turning red. "Rachel is your sister. She is carrying the future of this family. You have everything, Sarah. You have the fancy car, the business, the accolades. Rachel has nothing. She has struggled her whole life. She struggled because she's lazy." I screamed back. "She struggled because you enabled her. She struggled because she didn't have your luck," my mother yelled. "You were born lucky, Sarah. Everything comes easy to you. You owe it to help your sister. Luck. They called 18-hour workdays luck. They called ulcers and stress and sleepless nights luck. I am done helping, I said, my voice shaking with finality. I am cutting you all off. No more credit card payments. No more mortgage help. No more wedding funds. You are on your own. A heavy silence fell over the room. Rachel looked at Mark, worry flickering in her eyes for the first time. Mark stepped forward. You can't do that. Watch me. If you do, Mark said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, I will destroy your reputation. I will tell everyone that you were abusive. That you denied me children. That you're unstable. Go ahead, I challenged him. Who will believe you? Everyone, Rachel piped up. Because I'll back him up. And so will Mom and Dad. I looked at my parents. You would lie for him? Against me? My mother looked away. We have to think of the baby, Sarah. The baby needs resources. There it was. The ultimate betrayal. They were willing to destroy my reputation, my career, and my life, just to ensure that their golden child and her golden baby lived in luxury. Get out, I whispered. All of you. Get out of my house. Mark laughed. I don't think so. Like I said, this is my marital home. And Rachel is my guest. If anyone is leaving, Sarah, it's you. Excuse me? You're hysterical, Mark said calmly. You're scaring Rachel. You're endangering the baby. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll call the police and tell them you attacked a pregnant woman. I have witnesses. He gestured to my parents. My father nodded grimly. Ideally, you should go cool off somewhere, Sarah. My jaw dropped. They were staging a coup. In my own living room. You're kicking me out of the house I bought? We're asking you to leave for the safety of the family, Mark corrected. He walked over to the door and opened it. Pack a bag, Sarah. Go to a hotel. We'll have the lawyers talk on Monday. I looked at them. The united front. The wall of greed and entitlement. I realized then that I couldn't win this fight tonight. I was outnumbered. I was emotionally shattered. And if the police came, my parents would lie, and I would end up in jail. Fine, I said, my voice cold as ice. I'll leave. I walked upstairs like a zombie. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could hear Rachel giggling as soon as I turned the corner. I went into the bedroom, the room I had designed with such care. The custom drapes, the hand-woven rug, the art pieces I had collected from my travels. It all felt contaminated now. I grabbed a small suitcase from the closet. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. I threw in whatever I could find. Underwear. A few shirts. My laptop. My chargers. I looked at the safe in the corner of the closet. I hesitated. Should I open it? No. Mark knew the code. If I opened it now, he might hear the beep. He might come up here and take whatever I pulled out. I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. I closed the suitcase. I grabbed my purse. I checked for my car keys. As I walked back downstairs, the living room was quiet. They were waiting for me to leave so they could celebrate. Mark was standing by the front door, holding it open. He looked like a bouncer at a club, kicking out a drunk patron. Leave the house keys, he said. Are you serious? Leave them. I don't want you sneaking back in and stressing Rachel out. I unhooked the house key from my ring and dropped it into his outstretched palm. It felt like handing over a piece of my soul. Smart choice, he said. Don't worry. We'll take good care of the place. Rachel has some ideas for redecorating. She thinks the beige is a bit drab. I didn't answer. I couldn't trust myself to speak. I walked past him, out into the cool evening air. It had started to rain. Of course it had. I walked to my car, a sleek black Mercedes parked in the driveway. It was the only thing I had right now that felt safe. As I opened the door, I heard the front door of the house slam shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I sat in the driver's seat, locked the doors, and just breathed. The rain drummed against the roof. I looked up at the house. The lights were on in the living room. I could see shadows moving. They were in there. Eating my food. Drinking my wine. Planning their future with my money. My parents were probably cooing over Rachel's belly. Mark was probably pouring himself a scotch, my vintage Macallan. I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal sound of rage and grief. But I swallowed it down. Screaming wouldn't help. Screaming would just fog up the windows. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. I drove down the street, the windshield wipers swishing back and forth like a metronome. Where was I going? I couldn't go to a friend's house. I was too ashamed. How do you tell your friends that your husband left you for your pregnant sister and your parents helped him do it? It was too humiliating. I drove to a hotel downtown. Not a luxury one. I didn't want to run into anyone I knew. I chose a generic business hotel near the airport. Check-in was a blur. The receptionist smiled at me, asking if I was in town for business or pleasure. Business, I said automatically. Survival business. She looked confused, but handed me the key card. I walked into the beige room with its generic art and stiff sheets. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. I was 48 years old. I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. And I was homeless. I was alone. I lay back on the bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling. The tears finally came then. Hot, angry tears that burned my skin. I cried for the baby I never had. I cried for the marriage that was a lie. I cried for the sister I had loved and the parents who had betrayed me. I cried until I was empty. Until there was nothing left but a dry, hollow ache. And then, in the silence of that hotel room, something shifted. The victim in me, the sad, infertile, invisible Sarah, started to fade. And in her place, the CEO stepped forward. I sat up. I wiped my face. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought I was weak. But they had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just a checkbook. I was a shark. I built an empire from nothing. I negotiated contracts with ruthless developers. I managed crises for a living. Mark thought he knew everything about our finances. He thought community property was a magic wand that would give him half my kingdom. But Mark was lazy. He never read the fine print. And he had forgotten about the year 1998. I stopped crying. Crying was for people who had no options. I had options. I had a brain, and I had a memory that was slowly waking up from the fog of trauma. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the harsh fluorescent mirror. My eyes were red, my mascara was smeared, but my jaw was set. Okay, Sarah, I whispered to my reflection. Think. Analyze. Strategize. I went back to the desk and opened my laptop. I didn't log into my bank account. I knew that was a crime scene. Instead, I logged into my secure cloud storage, the one Mark didn't know the password to. I started scrolling through files from years ago. Mark was arrogant. His arrogance was his greatest weapon, but it was also his fatal flaw. He assumed that because we were married, he owned me. He assumed that because I was generous, I was stupid. He assumed that the house we lived in was marital property. I found the folder labeled Personal Legal Permanent. My hand stopped shaking as I clicked it open. There it was. A PDF document dated 20 years ago. The Sarah Jenkins Irrevocable Trust. I remembered the day I signed it. I was 28. My company was just taking off. I had a mentor back then, David's father, a shark of a lawyer named Mr. Gold. Sarah, he had told me, swirling his brandy. You have a big heart. You give too much. One day, someone is going to try to take everything from you. A man, a family member, a lawsuit. You need to protect yourself from your own generosity. He had made me set up the trust. An irrevocable trust. I had put the initial equity of the company into it. And, crucially, when I bought the house 5 years ago, I didn't buy it in my name. I bought it in the name of the trust. I scanned the document, my eyes devouring the legalese. Beneficiary, Sarah Jenkins. Trustee, David Gold, Mr. Gold's son, my old friend. Clause 4.2, assets held within the trust are not subject to marital division. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. It was a cold, dangerous smile. Because it was an irrevocable trust, the assets technically didn't belong to me. They belonged to the trust entity. Which meant they definitely didn't belong to Mark. And then, I opened another file. Prenuptial agreement. Mark had signed it the day before our wedding. He had been so eager to marry me, so eager to access my lifestyle, that he hadn't even read it properly. He had called it unromantic paperwork and scribbled his signature just to shut me up. I read the infidelity clause. If either party is found to have committed adultery resulting in the conception of a child outside the marriage, any claim to spousal support is null and void. I laughed. A loud, sharp laugh that echoed in the empty hotel room. Mark hadn't just cheated. He had impregnated my sister. He had handed me the smoking gun on a silver platter. I wasn't helpless. I was armed. They wanted a war? I would give them a nuclear winter. I picked up my phone. It was 11 p.m., but I knew who to call. I dialed David Gold. He answered on the second ring. Sarah? Is everything okay? No, David, I said, my voice steady and clear. Everything is wrong. But I'm about to make it right. I need you to dust off the trust documents. And I need a forensic accountant. Forensic accountant? David sounded wide awake now. Why? Because, I said, looking at the rain streaming down the window, my husband just stole $15,000. And I have a feeling that's just the tip of the iceberg. I want to know where every single penny has gone for the last 5 years. Sarah, what did he do? He woke the sleeping dragon, David. I'm going to burn them down. I'm going to take the house, the money, and the company. And I'm going to leave them with nothing but each other. I'm in, David said without hesitation. Meet me at my office at 8 a.m. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in my house, Mark and Rachel were probably celebrating. They thought they had won the lottery. They thought I was a broken woman crying in a hotel room. Let them think that. Let them get comfortable. Let them unpack their bags and pick out nursery colors. Because when I came back, I wasn't just coming back for my clothes. I was coming back for justice. The next morning, I woke up in the hotel room, the unfamiliar stiffness of the mattress reminding me instantly that my life had imploded. But as I stared at the generic abstract art on the wall, I didn't feel the crushing weight of grief I had expected. Instead, I felt a cold, surgical precision taking over my mind. The time for tears was over. The time for an audit had begun. I dressed in a charcoal power suit, the one I usually reserved for hostile takeovers or firing senior executives. I pulled my hair back into a severe bun. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back wasn't a heartbroken wife. She was a CEO preparing to liquidate a failing asset. I drove straight to David Gould's office. David wasn't just my lawyer, he was the only person in the world who knew where the bodies were buried, financially speaking. He had been warning me about Mark for years, subtle hints over dinner that I had foolishly ignored, blinded by my desire for a happy family. When I walked into his conference room, the air was thick with the smell of expensive coffee and old paper. David was already there, flanked by a man I didn't recognize. This man was small, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of intense, unblinking stare that made you want to confess to crimes you hadn't committed. "Sarah," David said, not wasting time with pleasantries. "This is Arthur Henderson. He's a forensic accountant. I took the liberty of calling him last night after we hung up. He's been crawling through your company's back-end server since 3 a.m. "And?" I asked, sitting down. I didn't ask if it was bad. I knew it was bad. I just needed to know the blast radius. Henderson turned his laptop around. The screen was a spreadsheet, a sea of numbers, but red lines crisscrossed the screen like arterial spray. "Mrs. Jenkins," Henderson began, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. "Your husband wasn't just skimming off the top. He was drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat." He pointed to a column labeled Vendor Payments. "Do you recognize a company called Horizon Consulting Group?" I shook my head. "No. We use Horizon Logistics for shipping, but not consulting." "Exactly," Henderson said. "It's a classic mimicry fraud." He set up a shell company with a name similar to a legitimate vendor so the accounts payable department wouldn't flag it. "For the past 24 months, your company has been paying Horizon Consulting a retainer of $4,500 a month." I did the math quickly in my head. "That's over $100,000. $108,000 plus miscellaneous expense invoices," Henderson corrected. "But here is where it gets interesting." I traced the routing number for Horizon. "It doesn't go to a business account. It goes to a personal checking account in Nevada." He clicked a key, and a scanned image of a bank signature card popped up on the screen. My breath hitched. I knew that handwriting. It was loopy, childish, with hearts dotting the I's. "Rachel," I whispered. "Your sister is the sole signatory on the account," David said, his voice hard. "Mark approves the invoices, the company wires the money, and Rachel withdraws it. It's a conspiracy, Sarah. A documented, federal crime-level conspiracy." I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just that they were sleeping together. They were business partners in the destruction of my life. Every time I had complained to Rachel about work stress, about tight margins, she had nodded sympathetically, all while she was the one bleeding me dry. "There's more," Henderson said. He didn't offer comfort, he offered data. I looked into the withdrawals from Rachel's account. Rent for a luxury apartment downtown. Payments to a high-end fertility clinic starting 6 months ago. And substantial transfers to an entity called Golden Chip Enterprises. "What is Golden Chip?" I asked. "An online gambling clearinghouse," Henderson said. "It appears your husband has a significant gambling problem. He's been using your sister to launder money from your company to pay off his bookies." The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. Mark's mood swings. His late nights at the office. The sudden desperation for cash. He wasn't just a cheater, he was an addict. And he had dragged my sister into his addiction, using her as the bagman. "He's desperate," David noted, looking at the numbers. "Look at the dates. The transfers are getting larger and more frequent. He's chasing his losses. That's why he demanded the divorce now. He needs a lump sum settlement to cover a debt before his legs get broken. I leaned back in my chair, a dark smile forming on my lips. So, he's not just greedy. He's cornered. He's a rat in a trap, David agreed. And he thinks you're the cheese. Can we prove all of this? I asked. I mean, really prove it? Enough to put them away? Mrs. Jenkins, Henderson said, finally cracking a thin smile. I have the IP addresses. I have the digital signatures. I have the bank records. I could convict a ham sandwich with this evidence. Mark Jenkins is walking around with a target on his back, and he handed us the gun. Good, I said, standing up. David, prepare the divorce papers. But don't file them yet. I want them to sign my version first. You're going to confront them? David asked, looking worried. Sarah, these people are desperate. Mark is cornered. It could be dangerous. I'm not going to confront them, I said, smoothing my skirt. I'm going to invite them to a victory party. They think they've won. I'm going to let them believe it. I want them relaxed. I want them arrogant. And then, when they are sipping my champagne and counting my money, I'm going to drop the guillotine. I spent the next 2 days in a state of hyper-focused activity. I was a ghost in my own life. I stayed at the hotel, but I was everywhere. I hired a private investigator, a former cop named Miller, to tail Mark and Rachel. I needed to know exactly what they were doing while they squatted in my home. Miller's reports were nauseating, but useful. He sent me photos of Rachel driving my Mercedes, the one Mark swore was in the shop, to a baby boutique. I saw pictures of them carrying bags of clothes, toys, and expensive nursery furniture into my house. They were nesting. They were stripping my home of my identity and replacing it with their twisted new reality. But the most damning photo came on Friday afternoon. Miller sent a picture of Mark walking into a pawn shop downtown. He was carrying a small velvet box. I zoomed in on the photo on my phone. My heart stopped. It was my grandmother's emerald brooch. It wasn't the most expensive thing I owned, but it was the most sentimental. It was the only thing I had left of the woman who raised me when my parents were too busy fawning over Rachel. He was selling my history to pay for his future. I called the pawn shop immediately. I described the brooch. The owner, sounding suspicious, confirmed a man had just pawned it for $800. Don't sell it, I told him, my voice shaking with rage. That item is stolen property. I am filing a police report. If you sell it, I will sue you for receiving stolen goods. The owner quickly agreed to hold it. I hung up, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. That was the final straw. They could take the money. They could take the house. But they would not take my grandmother. I called David. It's time. Set it up for Saturday noon. Are you sure you can handle this, Sarah? David asked. You sound on edge. I'm not on edge, David. I'm sharpened. I'm ready to cut. I went to a copy shop and printed 3 sets of documents. The trust deed. The prenuptial agreement. The forensic audit. I bound them in innocent-looking blue folders. Then, I went shopping. I bought a bottle of Dom Perignon. I bought a box of high-end pastries. I wanted this to look like a surrender. I wanted to play the role of the defeated, broken wife perfectly. I sent the text to Mark. I'm done fighting. You win. Come to the house at noon tomorrow. I'll sign whatever you want. Just let me move on. He replied instantly. Finally. Don't be late. That night, lying in the hotel bed, I rehearsed every line. I anticipated every objection. I visualized Mark's face, Rachel's tears, my parents' excuses. I built a fortress around my emotions. I thought about the baby. My nephew. The innocent life caught in this web of greed. A pang of sadness hit me. He didn't ask to be born into this mess. He didn't ask for a father who was a thief and a mother who was a parasite. "I'm sorry, little one," I whispered into the dark. "I can't save you from your parents. But I can make sure they never hurt anyone else again." I pulled up the forensic report one last time. I looked at the gambling debts. Mark owed over $50,000 to a loan shark in Atlantic City. The deadline for payment was next week. That's why he was pawning my jewelry. That's why he was pressing for the house. He needed liquid assets, and he needed them now. If I didn't stop him, he would have drained the company accounts dry within a month. He would have destroyed the livelihoods of my 50 employees. He would have burned everything I built to keep himself warm. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my employees, for my legacy, for justice. The victim Sarah died in that hospital bed 8 years ago. The Sarah who woke up tomorrow was the executioner. Before I finally tried to sleep, I made one last mistake. I opened Instagram. I had blocked Rachel, but I created a burner account. I needed to see the narrative they were spinning. And there it was. A photo posted 2 hours ago. It was taken in my kitchen. Mark was standing behind Rachel, his hands on her pregnant belly. They were both laughing, holding mugs of cocoa. The caption read, "Finally building a home filled with love, not just money. #TrueLove, #OurMiracle, #NewChapter." My mother had commented, "So proud of you both for following your hearts. God works in mysterious ways." My aunt, "Beautiful. You deserve this happiness, Rachel." Hundreds of likes. Comments from people I knew, people I had fed, people I had helped. They were all celebrating my erasure. They were cheering for the destruction of my marriage as if it were a romantic comedy. "Love, not just money," I read the caption out loud. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. They were standing in a kitchen paid for by my money, drinking cocoa bought with my money, wearing clothes bought with my money, celebrating a baby funded by my stolen money. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I brushed it away angrily. I set up my phone on the hotel desk. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. Someone who wasn't blinded by their lies. I hit record. "I am sitting in a cheap hotel room while my husband and sister play house in the mansion I built," I said to the camera, my voice trembling but gaining strength. "They think they've won. They think because I've been quiet for 3 days, I'm broken. They don't know that silence isn't surrender. Silence is reloading." I looked directly into the lens. I know I'm not the only one. I know there are women out there who have been told to sit down and shut up. To let the family take what they want because family comes first. Well, tomorrow, I'm going to show them that justice comes first. I took a deep breath. If you are still listening to my story, please help me like the video and comment number 1 below. This tells me that you are amazing, and I understand that you are accompanying me throughout this journey. Your help is a huge encouragement, cheering me on. Please comment number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, listen to me continue telling my story. I stopped the recording. I didn't post it. Not yet. I saved it. It would be part of my documentary one day. Saturday at 11 a.m. I arrived at the house an hour early. I parked down the street and walked up the driveway, avoiding the security cameras I knew Mark had probably monitored. I used the emergency key hidden inside the false sprinkler head in the garden, another secret Mark was too lazy to notice. The house was quiet, but it smelled wrong. It smelled of stale pizza and Mark's cheap body spray, masking the scent of the lavender diffusers I always used. I walked through the rooms. They had already started changing things. My antique vases were gone, replaced by tacky live, laugh, love signs. There were boxes everywhere labeled nursery. I went to the dining room. I set the table. Not for a meal, but for a negotiation. I placed the 3 blue folders at the head of the table. I placed the bottle of Dom Perignon in the center, next to the box of pastries. I sat down and waited. At 11:55 a.m., I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Laughter. Voices. The front door opened. "Hello?" Mark's voice boomed. "Sarah? You better be here." In the dining room, I called out. They walked in. It was a procession of arrogance. Mark led the way, looking like a rooster in a henhouse. Rachel waddled behind him, wearing a tight white dress that looked suspiciously like a maternity bridal gown. My parents followed, carrying balloons. Blue balloons. "It's a boy!" They were throwing a gender reveal party. At my divorce signing. "Sarah!" My mother rushed forward, trying to hug me. I stayed seated, my body rigid. She bounced off my icy demeanor and stepped back, looking awkward. We thought we'd make a day of it. Since we're all family." "Sit down," I said. They took their seats. Rachel sat at the foot of the table, opposite me. Mark sat to my right, claiming the position of power. My parents filled in the sides. "So," Mark said, rubbing his hands together. "You're finally being reasonable. I knew you'd come around. You're a smart businesswoman, Sarah. You know when to cut your losses." "I do," I said quietly. "I really do." "Did you bring the check?" Rachel asked, eyeing the champagne. "And the deed?" "We want to start the nursery renovations on Monday." "I brought everything," I said, tapping the folders. "But first, a toast." I popped the cork on the champagne. The sound made my father jump. I poured 5 glasses. I didn't pour one for Rachel, obviously, but Mark grabbed his glass greedily. "To new beginnings," I said, raising my glass. "To family," my mother added, tearing up. "To healing." "To the baby," Rachel said, rubbing her belly. "My little miracle." Mark clinked his glass against mine. "To getting what we deserve." I took a sip. It tasted like victory. "You're right, Mark," I said, setting the glass down. "We should all get exactly what we deserve." I opened the first folder. "Mark, you asked for the house. You said it's community property. You said since we lived here for 5 years, half of it is yours." "That's the law," Mark said, leaning back, relaxed. 50-50. "And the business," I continued. "You want half the valuation." "I contributed," Mark shrugged. "I gave you emotional support. I advised you." "You certainly did," I said. "And Rachel, you want child support? And alimony?" "Mark wants alimony," Rachel corrected. "I just want security. For the baby." "Of course," I said. "It's all about the baby." I looked at my parents. "And you too? You're moving in?" "We have to help with the baby," my father said, stuffing a pastry into his mouth. "And we sold our place. We gave the money to Mark to invest. So we're a bit short right now." I nodded. The picture was complete. They had bet the farm on Mark's scheme. "Well," I said, "I have reviewed all your demands. And I have reviewed the law." Mark smirked. And I realized," I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing all warmth, "that there has been a terrible misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" Mark's smile faltered. "You seem to think you are negotiating with your wife," I said. "But you're not. You're negotiating with a creditor. I slid the first folder across the table to Mark. Open it. Mark hesitated. He looked at the blue folder like it might bite him. He opened it slowly. What is this? He asked. This isn't the divorce decree. No, I said. It's the deed to the house. Read the owner's name, Mark. He squinted. Sarah Jenkins. Living trust? Trust? Rachel asked sharply. What does that mean? It means, I said, leaning forward, that I don't own this house, Mark. The trust does. And do you know who controls the trust? Not me. A trustee. And do you know what the trust bylaws say about unauthorized occupants? Mark went pale. You can't do this. We're married. It's marital property. Wrong, I said. I bought this house with funds from the trust, which was established before we met. It is separate property. It never commingled. You have been living here as a guest. And as of this morning. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was an eviction notice. Your guest privileges have been revoked. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the bubbles popping in the champagne glasses. Eviction? My mother whispered. Sarah, you can't evict your sister. She's pregnant. I'm not evicting my sister, I said calmly. The trust is evicting a squatter. This is bullshit. Mark slammed his fist on the table. I'll sue you. I'll take you to court. No judge will throw a pregnant woman on the street. Actually, I said, a judge already did. I got the emergency order signed this morning. You have 24 hours to vacate. If you're not gone by noon tomorrow, the sheriff comes to escort you out. We have nowhere to go. Rachel screamed. We sold everything. Mom and Dad sold their condo. That sounds like a you problem, I said. But wait, there's more. I slid the second folder across the table. You wanted half the company, Mark. You said you helped build it. Mark glared at me, his eyes filled with hate. I did. I managed the books. We'll get to the books in a minute, I said. But first, let's talk about the prenup. I didn't sign a prenup. Mark lied. Or if I did, it was under duress. You signed it 2 days before the wedding, in front of a notary and your own lawyer, I reminded him. And you were quite happy to sign it because you thought you'd never get caught. Caught doing what? Clause 8C, I said. The morality clause. It's a standard clause in high-asset prenups, Mark. It states that if either party commits adultery that results in a child born out of wedlock, they forfeit all claims to any appreciation of separate property assets. Mark froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I pointed to Rachel's belly. That, I said, is a breach of contract. $1 million breach. Rachel looked at Mark. Her eyes were wide with panic. Mark? What is she talking about? Does that mean we don't get the company money? Mark didn't answer. He was staring at the document, reading the lines over and over again. It means, I said, answering for him, that Mark leaves this marriage with exactly what he came in with. Which, if I recall correctly, was a used Honda Civic and a maxed-out credit card. No. Mark whispered. No. That clause is archaic. It won't hold up. Try me, I said. My lawyer, David Gold, wrote it. He's never lost a prenup case in 30 years. You want to spend the next 5 years in court, spending money you don't have, fighting a losing battle? Go ahead. You planned this, Rachel hissed. You let us get pregnant just to trap us. I didn't let you do anything, Rachel, I snapped. You slept with my husband. You stole my life. Did you really think I was just going to hand you a check and wish you luck? But the baby, my father shouted. Sarah, punish Mark if you want, but Rachel is family. The baby is your blood. You have to support them. Why? I asked. Because you failed to support her? You raised her to be helpless. You raised her to be a parasite. And now she's found a new host. But guess what? This host is dying. I'm not dying. Rachel yelled. The host is me, I said. I'm cutting you off. All of you. No more money. No more bailouts. Mark suddenly stood up. He knocked his chair over. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. You think you're so smart, he sneered. You think a piece of paper protects you? I know things, Sarah. I know about your tax shelters. I know about the offshore accounts. If you don't give me what I want, I'll report you to the IRS. I stared at him. A slow smile spread across my face. Oh, Mark, I said softly. I was really hoping you would bring up the taxes. I reached for the third folder. The thickest one. Because that brings us to the most interesting part of our little meeting. Mark's eyes flicked to the folder. He saw the logo on the front page. Henderson Forensic Accounting. His bravado evaporated instantly. He sat back down, hard. What is that? He whispered. This, I said, is a detailed record of every single dollar you have stolen from me in the last 3 years. Stolen? Rachel squeaked. Mark didn't steal. He earned bonuses. Is that what he told you? I opened the folder. Did he tell you that the $4,500 a month he was wiring to Horizon Consulting was a bonus? Rachel went pale. She looked at Mark. You said that was your salary. You said Sarah approved it. I never approved a dime to a shell company in Nevada, Rachel, I said. And I certainly never approved you as the signatory. I pulled out a copy of a check. A check signed by Rachel Miller. This is your signature, isn't it? Rachel trembled. I just signed where he told me to. I didn't know. It's called money laundering, Rachel, I said. And conspiracy to commit embezzlement. It's a felony. I turned back to Mark. He was sweating now. Profusely. $250,000, I said. That's the total. Plus the $15,000 for the clinic. Plus the $40,000 you sent to Golden Chip Enterprises. My parents looked confused. What is Golden Chip? My mother asked. It's an online casino, I said. Your son-in-law isn't an investor, Dad. He's a gambler. A losing gambler. That's a lie. Mark shouted. I was day trading. I was trying to grow our portfolio. By betting on virtual blackjack at 3 a.m.? I asked. I have the logs, Mark. I have the IP addresses. You lost the money. And then you stole from my company to pay your debts. And when that wasn't enough, you stole my grandmother's brooch. My mother gasped. Mother's emerald brooch? You sold it? Mark looked down at the table. I was going to buy it back. Once the divorce settlement came through. You pawned it for $800, I said with disgust. To buy into a poker game. You are pathetic. So, what now? Mark asked, his voice low and dangerous. You going to sue me? Good luck collecting. I have nothing. I know you have nothing, I said. That's why I'm not suing you for the money. Then what do you want? I want justice. I checked my watch. 12:30. What happens at 12:30? Rachel asked, looking around nervously. At 12:30, I said, the police arrive. Mark shot up from his chair. You called the cops? I did. And I sent them this file 3 hours ago. You bitch. Mark lunged across the table. It happened in slow motion. Mark reaching for me, his hands like claws. My father shouting. Rachel screaming. But he never reached me. The front door kicked open. It wasn't locked. I had left it unlocked for a reason. Police. Nobody move. 3 officers stormed into the dining room, guns drawn. Mark Jenkins. Hands where I can see them. Mark froze, halfway across the table, one hand knocking over the champagne bottle. It shattered on the floor, foaming liquid pooling around its boy balloons. Don't shoot! Mark screamed, raising his hands. She's crazy. She invited us here. It's a domestic dispute. The lead officer, a burly man with a no-nonsense face, walked up to Mark. Mark Jenkins, you are under arrest for grand larceny, embezzlement, and wire fraud. He grabbed Mark's arm and spun him around. The handcuffs clicked. You have the right to remain silent. Rachel! Mark shouted as he was dragged away from the table. Call the lawyer. Call the guy I told you about. But Rachel wasn't calling anyone. She was trying to hide under the table. Rachel Miller, the officer said, looking down at her. Please stand up. No, she sobbed. I'm pregnant. I didn't do anything. We have a warrant for your arrest for conspiracy and money laundering, the officer said. Stand up, ma'am. Do not make us use force. Sarah. Rachel looked at me, her face a mask of terror. Sarah, tell them. Tell them I didn't know. I'm your sister. I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had slept with my husband, who had spent my money on a nursery while plotting to kick me out of my own home. You signed the checks, Rachel, I said calmly. You spent the money. You're an adult. Mom! Rachel screamed as a female officer pulled her up and cuffed her hands in front of her belly. Mom, help me! My mother was sobbing hysterically, clutching my father. Officer, please. She's having a baby. You can't take her to jail. She'll be processed and seen by a medic, the officer said. But she is coming with us. They dragged them out. Mark, cursing and shouting threats. Rachel, wailing like a banshee. My house was suddenly full of uniformed strangers. They were taking photos of the documents on the table. They were bagging Mark's laptop. I stood in the corner, watching it all. I felt numb. But it was a good numb. The numbness of a cancer finally being cut out. My father stood up, shaking. He looked at me with eyes full of hate. Are you happy now? He spat. You sent your own sister to prison. You destroyed your family. I didn't destroy anything, Dad, I said. I just took out the trash. The police cleared out by 1 p.m. They took the evidence, they took the criminals, and they left me with the silence. My parents were the last to leave. They refused to look at me as they packed their bags. They called a taxi to take them to a motel. Don't expect to hear from us, my mother said at the door, her voice trembling with rage. You are dead to us. I've been dead to you for years, I said. You just didn't notice because the checks were still clearing. I closed the door and locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then the security system. I slid down to the floor and sat there in the foyer. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in 20 years, the air in my house felt clean. But the war wasn't over. The next few weeks were a legal hurricane. Mark was denied bail. The judge looked at his gambling debts, his lack of ties to the community since I evicted him, and the sheer scale of the fraud, and deemed him a flight risk. Rachel made bail, posted by my parents who had to sell their car and cash out their last remaining life insurance policy. She was confined to the motel room with them, wearing an ankle monitor. Then came the phone calls. The first one was from the jail. Mark. I accepted it because David told me to record everything. Sarah, Mark's voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone. Sarah, baby, please. You have to drop the charges. I can't stay here. They know I was in finance. They think I have money. I'm a target. You're not in finance, Mark, I said. You're a thief. I'll give you everything, he begged. I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll admit to the affair in court. Just tell the DA it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I had verbal authorization. I can't lie to the police, Mark. That would be a crime. Rachel is going to testify against me, he shouted, his voice cracking. She's cutting a deal. She's telling them I forced her. You know that's a lie. She wanted the money as much as I did. She's the one who wanted the penthouse. I know, I said. And that's why she's going down too. But thanks for confirming it. I hung up. The second blow came from Rachel's lawyer. She was claiming coercion. She was painting herself as the naive victim of a manipulative older man. David and I sat down with the DA. We showed them the text messages I had recovered from the cloud, Mark's old phone backup. Rachel, make sure you transfer the $5,000 today, I saw a stroller I want. Rachel, did she notice the withdrawal? LOL, she's so clueless. Rachel, I can't wait until she's kicked out and we can redecorate. The DA read the texts. He looked at David. Coercion my ass. She's the ringleader. Exactly, David said. No plea deal for her either. The flying monkeys were relentless. My aunt posted a long rant on Facebook about how I was a jealous, barren woman punishing her fertile sister. I didn't respond. I simply sued her for defamation. David sent a cease and desist letter that was so terrifying she deleted her account within an hour. I was systematically dismantling their support network. I was isolating them. One night, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was my father. He looked old. Broken. I opened the door, leaving the chain on. What do you want? We have no food, he said. He wasn't demanding anymore. He was begging. Rachel needs vitamins. The motel, it has bed bugs. Sarah, please. Just a few $100s. I looked at the man who had ignored my achievements my entire life. The man who had sided with my cheating husband because he wanted a grandson. I can't give you money, I said. But I can give you a job application. I slid a paper through the crack. It was a flyer for a cleaning service. They're hiring, I said. Honest work. You should try it. He stared at the paper. Then he spat on my porch. You will burn in hell. Maybe, I said, closing the door. But at least I'll have my own house. The trial took place 3 months later. It was a media circus. The millionaire design CEO versus the cheating husband and the pregnant sister. The tabloids loved it. I testified for 2 days. I sat on the stand, calm and composed, while Mark's lawyer tried to paint me as a cold, unloving wife who drove him to seek comfort elsewhere. Mrs. Jenkins, isn't it true you spent more time at the office than at home? I was working to pay for the lifestyle my husband felt entitled to, I answered. Isn't it true you denied him children? I had a hysterectomy to save my life, I said, looking directly at the jury. If that is denial, then yes, I denied him. The jury, mostly women, hated him. Then came the turn. Mark took the stand to save himself. He threw Rachel under the bus so hard I heard the bones crunch. It was her idea, he sobbed. She seduced me. She said Sarah was too old. She said we deserved the money. She forged the signatures. Rachel screamed from the defense table. Liar! You said you loved me. The judge had to bang the gavel. It was pathetic. It was a soap opera. And I was the producer. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Mark Jenkins, guilty on all counts. Sentenced to 5 years in state prison. Rachel Miller, guilty of conspiracy and fraud. Sentenced to 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service, plus restitution. The judge went easy on her because of the pregnancy, but the felony record stuck. 2 weeks after the verdict, Rachel went into labor. She was in the motel room. My parents tried to call an ambulance, but they didn't have insurance, so they hesitated. By the time they got to the county hospital, it was a messy birth. David told me the news. It's a boy. Mark Jr. Is he healthy? I asked. He is. But Child Protective Services is involved. They're concerned about the living situation. A motel room with 3 unemployed adults and a convicted felon? What will happen? They might place him in foster care. I sat in my office, looking at the city view. I thought about that baby. My blood. I could take him. I could step in, flash my money, and get custody. I could raise him. It was tempting. It was the redemption arc everyone wanted. The barren woman saves the baby. But then I remembered Rachel's face. Mark's face. If I took that baby, I would be tied to them forever. They would use him to get to me. To get money. To get back into my life. No, I said. I can't take him. Are you sure? David asked. I'm sure. But I will set up an anonymous trust for him. For his education. He can access it when he's 18. Until then, he's better off away from all of us. Even me. Mark went to prison. He was assigned to the laundry detail. I heard through the grapevine that he was not popular. He tried to act like a big shot, telling inmates he was a financial genius, and got beaten up for his shoes. Rachel and my parents moved to a trailer park in a neighboring state. They couldn't afford to live in the city anymore. Rachel works at a diner. My parents live off Social Security. They are miserable, and they blame each other every day. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. The ghosts were too loud. I bought a penthouse downtown. It's all glass and steel and light. I decorated it myself, not for a family, but for me. My business exploded. The publicity from the trial, oddly enough, brought in clients. Women wanted to hire the Iron Lady who took down her cheating husband. I became a symbol of resilience. I started dating again. Slowly. I met James at a gallery opening. He's an architect. He's divorced, has 2 grown kids, and doesn't want any more. He has his own money. He has his own life. On our 3rd date, I told him everything. The hysterectomy. The betrayal. The revenge. I expected him to run. Most men would find it too much drama. James just looked at me, took a sip of his wine, and said, "Remind me never to piss you off." We laughed. It was the first time I had laughed without bitterness in years. I'm not healed completely. I still have trust issues. I still check my bank accounts every morning. But I'm free. I realized that for 40 years, I was trying to buy love. I thought if I was useful enough, rich enough, generous enough, they would love me. But you can't buy love. You can only rent parasites. I visited the ocean yesterday. I stood on the shore, letting the cold water rush over my feet. I thought about the Sarah who stood in that church, paying for her sister's wedding, desperate for approval. She feels like a stranger to me now. A ghost. I forgave her. I forgave myself for being blind. For being weak. For wanting a family so badly I let them bleed me dry. But I won't forgive them. Forgiveness is overrated. Sometimes, anger is the fuel you need to survive. Sometimes, burning the bridge is the only way to stop the enemy from following you. I still get letters from Mark. He's found God in prison. He says he prays for me. I burn them unopened. I set up the Second Act Foundation. We help women who have been victims of financial abuse. We provide forensic accountants, lawyers, and therapists. We help them find their hidden money and their hidden strength. Every time we win a case, every time a woman gets her house back or sends her abuser to jail, I feel a little piece of my soul healing. My nephew, Mark Jr., was placed with a nice foster family in Oregon. I get updates from the social worker. He's happy. He doesn't know who his parents are. And honestly, that's the greatest gift I could give him. So, to everyone listening, to every woman who is holding a family together with her bare hands while they pick her pockets, stop. Look at the bank accounts. Read the texts. Trust your gut. You are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are being used. And you have the power to stop it. You don't need a husband to validate you. You don't need a sister to define you. You don't need parents to approve of you. You just need yourself. And maybe a really good lawyer. This is Sarah Jenkins, signing off. And remember, living well isn't the best revenge. Watching them live with the consequences of their actions, that is the best revenge. Meredith's journey reminds us that sometimes the most painful betrayals come from those who should love us most. In a world where family ties are often romanticized, her story stands as a powerful testament to the courage it takes to recognize toxic relationships and set healthy boundaries. What makes her tale so compelling isn't just the dramatic confrontation, but the inner transformation, from a daughter desperately seeking approval to a woman who values herself enough to demand respect. The renovation metaphor throughout the story serves as a profound life lesson. Just as Meredith discovered structural issues beneath the beautiful facade of her family home, many of us must examine the foundations of our relationships. Are they built on mutual respect and genuine care, or on exploitation and conditional love? True strength isn't found in enduring mistreatment for the sake of family harmony, but in having the courage to rebuild on more solid ground, even when that means starting from scratch. Perhaps the most valuable insight from Meredith's experience is that our worth isn't determined by others' perception of us. Like the house she renovated, her true value is always there, it simply needed to be recognized. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against those who should have protected you? Have you found the courage to rebuild after betrayal? Comment good if this story resonated with you and reminded you of your own inherent worth, regardless of how others have treated you.